we need a space to talk about pressing issues about our faith and our children and how to raise them in this crazy old world that we live in.
Yeah, I think the challenge starts when they're, in their primary years, much, much younger.
Hisham, I've known you for a long time and we've known each other through the stages of life. So we're both parents now, alhamdulillah. So
Yeah,
I wanted to start Muslim Dads Talk, MDT,
yeah,
because I think there is a space for this. And I think as Muslim men, we need a space to talk about pressing issues about our faith and our children and how to raise them in this crazy old world that we live in. So you were just telling me off camera about some of the things about the space of Muslim parenting in 2024. Tell me a bit more before we dive right into what we're going to talk about.
yeah. I think it's an interesting concept that you're going into because when you hear the word kind of Muslim dads, you might think, okay, parenting in terms of when the children are much older in their teens, but actually, I think the challenge starts when they're, in their primary years, much, much younger, and they're starting to engage with the kind of social setting of going through school, and the various kind of challenges that arise with that. And being a Muslim yourself, you're trying to instill certain moral and spiritual values in your children, which are often directed to start from a very young age. But it's interesting to see that kind of almost pushback or distraction that the children start to engage with very early on. And it kind of puts the whole gravity of the situation in perspective. So it's a huge responsibility, I think. Try your best, your own efforts, and you need kind of combined support from the mum as well to be able to kind of action and implement that.
I 100% agree, and these are the thoughts that came to my mind when thinking about this, because I think we need a space to discuss certain issues. So, the first issue I wanted to talk about is sending your children as Muslims to nursery living in a non-Muslim country. So, what are the first thoughts you have when talking about that?
Here in the United Kingdom, I think we're very fortunate because the social setting for most primary schools or most kind of education platforms is not posed particularly or directly towards Islamic teaching. There are certain elements of certain topics that you might want we can delve into later, but generally speaking, the social format of school is about kind of following rules, teaching respect, teaching the children, education in terms of how they can use these skills in the future. So it is a development process, which is highly encouraging as a Muslim. The aspect or the challenge, suppose, comes when even from nursery, where you might start to wonder or see certain traits being formed where you're looking at their friend circle, you're looking at their teachers, their kind of social circle as well. What habits are they picking up? How are they, generally speaking, going to school, so going to nursery, doing a full day and then coming back, children are exhausted. And then at the end of the day, if you're trying to kind of instill or give some time towards their spiritual education, praying, it takes a lot out of them. And their behavior they might pick up, challenges, behavior, things change in that instance. So you have to kind of bear everything in mind, and it is a particular challenge. I think one thing personally, if I could add here, is one thing is that the days off or when they're young, you should kind of make an active effort as parents or as a father to engage with your children to find out what they're doing from school. They close up very, very quickly. I'm surprised with my daughter how much she's, already acting like a teen and she's got, all these kind of major demands and opinions, and you're trying to kind of negotiate and understand where she's learning everything from. Is it in the right direction? Is there space for spiritual and moral growth as well? If I could offer any advice for any new parent, it would be that, try and engage with your child as much as possible. Try and understand them. What kind of person are they, and how you can instill the values that you'd like for them in a way that's not that's productive for them.
I really want to zone in on nursery. I watched a video by Erica Komisar, I believe, who has specialist knowledge in the field of psychology and
Mm,
childhood development. And she said, do not at any cost send your child to any sort of preschool or nursery because they can develop attachment issues. The way they respond to you there and then will be different. And it's
mm,
interesting hearing that because there's a lot of research that seems to show that there can be negative psychological impacts while we go to work
yeah.
and we leave our kids there. But then at the same time, you picked up on a lot of positives in terms of instilling independence, particular types of skills, getting ready for the world that we exist in. So there's pros and cons to it.
the point you're making, I completely understand as well, because that age is such a fragile age, and anything that happens at that age that has a negative effect will cause long-lasting trauma or attachment issues, like you mentioned. From a personal perspective, we went through COVID-19 recently. My second child, my daughter, she was quite isolated from a social setting. So when she first stepped into nursery, it was hugely challenging for her. It caused a lot of social anxiety. That became very challenging because you're trying to balance the issue of kind of, when they're at home, you're still trying to look after their development and growth, but then they're picking things up from nursery or school or struggling with that anxiety element as well. So I think I understand both aspects. But having gone through it for her, for my daughter, for example, sending her eventually over time, it helped with her independence, with her confidence, and they worked very well as well in school. Personally speaking, I don't think that there's any problem in terms of sending them to nursery as long as you don't rely on that to be their source of development. As long as you make the active effort in their time off, or don't kind of make that a core part. They're not going to learn much from nursery in terms of what you'd like them to learn. If you want them to develop further, you have to do that in the evenings, on weekends. And I don't think nursery is like a mandatory either. So, you don't have to send them every day of the week. We just sent my daughter a couple of days of the week initially, just to kind of get the balance right. But it's always a constantly developing challenge.
I mean, Islamically, I want to just round it off because the Prophet ﷺ was sent away
Mm,
for his early development. However, at the same time, he was also sent to a lady of great stature, Halima
exactly.
Sadiya. So at the same time, we need those kind of values being instilled in our children. And are we always going to get that in a nursery where there's a ratio of one caregiver to five, six children? Two of them probably have a viral infection.
Exactly. Yeah.
Caregiver may have their own issues at the time, may not be fully present, right? So, we have to really weigh up these decisions about our future generation very, very carefully.
Absolutely. I think it's about kind of exposing them, allowing for their self-development, exposing them to that environment, but then doing it with a balance, not overdoing it, not, some people they like to work full time and they'll send their children to nursery during that time. And I think for some couples that is the way they like to, but Islamically there's a lot of importance given on the development of the child. So and like you mentioned, if you're exposed to a good positive environment, then that will be beneficial. But equally, if there's any aspect of any negativity, the child will have a long-lasting kind of effect on that mentally, socially, and that's something to bear in mind, when you're making that decision.
Safely as Muslims.
Exactly, exactly.